Hello students, and welcome to this class of Schools of Sociological Theory. Today we have with us the conflict perspective, and specifically we are going to look at the contributions of Ralph Dahrendorf in the conflict theory. So, to put forth, Ralph Dahrendorf was a German sociologist and who contributed immensely towards the conflict theory. Nevertheless, Ralph Dahrendorf, like his contemporary Louis Koser, was also highly influenced by the functionalist perspective, or rather the structural functionalist perspective. And one can see a strong imprint of this perspective even though Ralph Dahrendorf is talking about conflict. And that's the irony of conflict theory, that although the theory was a wonderful alternative towards the functionalist perspective, many of the early conflict theorists could not do away with the imprint of the structuralist functionalist approach, even in the idea of conflict perspective. Nevertheless, let's look at what Ralph Dahrendorf has in store for us. So as you see here, for Ralph Dahrendorf, society is not static. Society always is dynamic and changes. You see that society is involved in a way with different aspects, and when we look at it, that society has varied aspects, you need multiple perspectives. Sociology is the study of society, and sociology, when it tries to look at society, looks at from these multiple perspectives, like the functionalist and the conflict. Recognizing the contribution of functionalist perspective, Ralph Dahrendorf feels that consensus is very important towards society, because without consensus you can't have the idea of society. And in a way, it is integration that plays a vital role towards society, and that happens because of the integration of varied values which are put forth to us to the socialization process and so on. And therefore, a part of society that is studied from this perspective could be looked at as, according to Dahrendorf, as a consensus theory, and the focus should be on value integration. But the other side of it, you see that in a given society there is also certain elements of society that are not in sync with each other's expectations, and this gives rise to conflict, and conflicts give rise to change, and as a result of which he says that one should be studying also society from a conflict perspective, wherein the focus should be the interest, the disintegration and change that happens in the society. So hence society can be studied through the consensus theory and the conflict theory according to Ralph Dahrendorf. Going further, Ralph Dahrendorf did make use of the structuralist functionalist approach, which I said in the introduction, like Louis Koser. And the most important thing was how is society held together. And here it is where we find that Ralph Dahrendorf is making a very significant point in terms of the conflict perspective. Because according to Ralph Dahrendorf, what holds society together is integration. And according to him, it is consensus and conflict both contribute to integration. And in a way, he's talking about the role of conflict in the integration of society. To this, the most central concept that Ralph Dahrendorf talks of is the concept of authority. And authority is what contributes to consensus or conflict, because authority is scarce, and there are people who contest this authority and there are people who accept this authority. The type of authority that is accepted easily is the legal authority. This is the authority that is voluntarily accepted, because there is voluntary cooperation of the members. And there is another type of authority which enforces and it constrains us. Even if we don't want to do something, it will force us to. We don't want it, we don't accept it, but we are forced upon. And this is enforced constraint, authority that happens because of enforcing the constraints. So this brings us back to the idea that authority is a central concept in the conflict perspective, whereby it is related to positions and not individuals. According to Dahrendorf, when we talk about authority, it is not related to one given individual, but rather it is related to the position. These positions have certain roles which are expected. These roles are given by societal expectations, and the roles being of different types, it is on the basis of this that determines whether that position is of greater authority or power compared to the other. So let's have a look at further in the context of what Ralph Dahrendorf has to say about authority, position and roles. So as you see here, authority is related to positions which are related to roles based on societal expectations and changes from position to position. So the roles and positions are both interrelated to, and the position changes from the roles basically change from position to position. And this brings us towards three important points. He says authority and positions bring in one, power. That is, when we look at power, it is legitimate authority which gives you power to impose. So through authority comes power, and power is looked at as a means to impose one's thought or will or expectations over the others. But many a time these are governed by certain rules and laws which allows one to do that. The second one is the idea of superordination and subordination, which is dichotomous. So with authority, with power, you always have two types of groups that emerge. Just like Karl Marx talks about the haves and the have-nots, you will have people who are in power being also, or people who are in authority also having power, and as a result of which they are the superordinates. But people who are not in power or who are not in any authority, they are the subordinates. So those in the idea is like here with these two groups emerging, those in power, those having control want to maintain it, and those who don't and desire to have certain amount of authority or power want to change those who have it. And this process is central in Ralph Dahrendorf's idea of change. How change happens? It happens because of groups, and this is what Ralph Dahrendorf speaks of in the context of groups, conflict and change. According to him, groups are of three types. One is the quasi group, two is the interest group, three is the conflict group. Now, looking at each of these groups, the quasi group is said to be a group that has aggregate of people who are in power or authority. So these in general form the quasi group. The interest groups are those that are recruited by certain members of the quasi group. The interest groups are the ones who have been recruited by the quasi group, and there are some members from the quasi group who desire change, so they would be recruiting some more members, and they together form the interest group. And from this interest group, there would be members who are more vocal and who would be trying to put forth their ideas of change, and they directly contribute as members of the conflict group. So let me explain to you this with the help of an example from a municipal. So as we saw about Ralph Dahrendorf with respect to groups, conflict and change, as I've explained this, I would like to give you an example about the groups. That's about the quasi group, the interest group and the conflict group. As you see, this explanation, the quasi groups, they are the aggregates of people in positions having authority. I would like to explain to you these three groups with the help of an example from politics in Goa. Let's take, for example, the municipal council, which recently had elections, say, for example, Margam. And there are people who are contesting these elections from different panels belonging to different political parties. Let's name an X political party and Y political party. The X political party, after the elections are over, wins the elections because their panel of members come to power. And the Y party do win some seats, but they don't have the maximum. So one has, say, 20 and another has 10 in the 30-member council. All the 30 members form the quasi group because all of them have certain positions and authority, and this is what forms the quasi group. But amongst them, you have people, especially the ones who are not in direct power, but they have certain power, but they are not the ruling party, not the ruling panel. They, along with the people who have actually lost the elections to the X party, may join hands with them, rather recruit them in their fold, and they will form the group. And once they form a group, they form the interest group, because their interest is that they want that next time there should be a change, there should be a transformation. They don't want the people who have formed the council, like the chairman, the deputy, the secretary, the treasurer, that they should be the same, but they want that to be changed because they want a greater position and power and authority as well. So they form the interest group, and directly some people who eye the position, okay, they will form the conflict group, because they will be the ones who would be taking up different issues and different aspects or drawbacks of the quasi group directly and contesting the same. So one sees that the conflict group emerges from the interest group, and the group that desires change emerges from this interest group and is determined strongly by the interest. So I hope with this example, these three groups are very clear to you. Thank you.